You know, in all honesty, I'm kind of surprised that there hasn't been a planet called Time within Doctor Who yet. Hello, interwebs! It is time for me to interview episode 2 of Doctor Who Flux, or Series 13, or whatever you want to call it. I'm very excited to talk about this episode. However, before we get into my actual nitty-gritty review of the episode, I do have to address a little bit of an elephant in the room really quickly and briefly. For those of you who don't know, the BBC is currently embroiled in a little bit of a controversy, especially within the trans community, for an article that they posted up that not only was a breach of journalistic standards and just didn't live up to BBC's own standards of journalism, and quite clearly, and also is incredibly transphobic and very harmful to the trans community, as well as platforming a woman, or at least in the original version of the article, platforming a woman who literally called for the genocide and lynching of transgender people. As should be obvious, this article is incredibly harmful, and if you want to know more about it specifically, we'll link to a video down below done by my friend Vera Wild, who discusses the article and the person that was platformed in specific. And then I've also done a bigger video on my channel that sort of gives a broader context towards these anti-transgender movements that this article is indicative of, that I'll also link below. So please check out both of those for information on that. The reason I bring it up is obviously Doctor Who is made and produced by the BBC, and I was deeply thinking about not continuing to review these episodes of this series, but I ultimately decided to continue doing so for 3 reasons. The first reason, number 1, is that when transphobes do horrible transphobic stuff, they do not get to take away the things that I enjoy away from me, and I enjoy watching the show, and I enjoy reviewing the show, as I know many of you do as well. And I know there's been a lot of stuff around creators of franchises that a lot of us nerds love that have come out as intensely transphobic or other things as well, and they don't get to take it away from us. They don't get to take away the things that we love from us, and so I'm going to continue doing these reviews in that stead. The second reason is that by doing these reviews, hopefully maybe someone will come upon these videos, see me talking about this issue with the BBC, and therefore learn about some of these problems with the BBC in general. So hopefully that can help educate people as well who just come for Doctor Who, but may actually learn a little bit about some issues that are facing the trans community in general. So if you are someone who didn't know about these things, I really encourage you to check out those videos that I linked below, because I do think it's important for you to be aware of these issues, as it harms the trans community immensely, especially in the United Kingdom. And third and finally, the other thing that I should say is that the creators of Doctor Who, both Chris Chibnall, who is making this season, and Russell T Davies, who is going to be taking over the show in just a little bit, have both expressed explicit support for the transgender community, with Russell T Davies recently giving a speech where he explicitly called out the LGBT Alliance, which is one of the groups that's pushing these narratives against trans people in the UK, for being intensely transphobic. And so in that vein, if the creators of the show, while they are being supported by the BBC, which I do find intensely problematic, the people making the show that I care about are supportive of the trans community, and in that vein, I wish to acknowledge that and support that. So those are the 3 reasons that I'm still going to be becoming Doctor Who. I totally understand if other people don't want to continue watching Doctor Who because of these things. That is perfectly understandable, and I by no means judge anybody for that decision. It's something that I struggled with as well, but obviously, as I said, those are the reasons for which I'm going to be continuing watching the show, because I do wish to enjoy Doctor Who and share that enjoyment with all of you, but also making sure I put these caveats in here. So with all that non-fun, kind of frustrating and sad stuff out of the way, let's actually get to the review of the show that you came here for, Doctor Who Flux. So I'm going to go full into spoilers here, because this is a serialized show, and it's kind of going to be difficult to say spoiler-free for the most part on these discussions. So for the rest of Doctor Who Flux, I'm mainly just going to do spoilerific discussions on the episode, but I'll try and keep it as light as I possibly can until later on in the video. But getting into full discussion on this one, I liked this episode quite a bit more than the first episode. The first episode was very messy, very much like setting up all the different things, and this episode focused in a little bit more. There's still a little bit of setup stuff going on here, and a little bit of like, hey, you remember this storyline that's here? We're gonna get to that eventually, but not in this episode. And it's just sort of like reminders of stuff, and just like a couple moments where just pushing the story forward just a little bit instead of all the way. But for the most part, this episode mainly stuck to the Sontaran storyline, and while I have some frustrations with some of the conveniences within that story, I did have a lot of fun with it. So I'm glad that this episode, while it did push forward the main story a little bit, and I even enjoyed some of that stuff, even if it didn't go super, super far, the main plot of this episode was a lot of fun. I enjoyed the adventure, though there are some frustrations that I have with some of the plot choices within it. Also, I should mention, just throughout this episode, the visuals on this thing were, like, really, really cool. Like, this era of Doctor Who has had some really strong visuals overall, but I have, in just this episode specifically, I was like, dang, some of the visuals here are really great. Like, there's a scene where the Doctor, like, puts her hand through like a force field thing, and it looked dang cool, and the Sontaran ships that we see were also really badass to see throughout this episode. So all of that, just visually, this episode was fairly stunning. But getting into the plot of this, so we start off the episode with the Doctor, Yaz, and Dan having arrived in the Crimean War, and I liked seeing the Doctor, like, being able to quickly figure out where they are just from context clues, and meeting Mary Soul, who I really also loved learning and seeing her. The actress who played Mary Soul this episode was a lot of fun. I loved her heart and warmth, and just ability to just, bounce off of the Doctor. I'm really loving, the one thing that I will say about Chris Chibnall's era is I really love that they draw attention to the smaller, lesser-known women throughout history. It's something that, while I have not loved Chris Chibnall's art run on the show in general, that has been a recurring theme throughout his series, where he's drawn attention to underappreciated women throughout history, and I think that that's really cool, and that continues here, and I really love that. However, we quickly learn that the Sontarans are actually in the Crimean War, which is not supposed to happen. One of those typical Doctor Who setups, like, oh, aliens aren't supposed to be here, what's going on? But also with this added, like, they were being sent here by the Flux, what's going on with the Flux, and stuff like that, sort of added into the mix here. One thing I thought was weird is that immediately Dan and Yaz disappear and get sent off to wherever the plot needs them to be at this point. And so I found that to be a bit weird that they just back to the future to where the plot needed them to go, because there seemed to be no real rhyme or reason for it. The Doctor says it's like a mixture of flux and vortex energy, which is weird considering that the Doctor doesn't know what the flux is yet, so how would you be able to deduce that or not be more concerned that they were disappearing? And Dan just going back to where he came from, and Yaz going to this time planet, which is also where she needed to be for the plot to happen for her, just felt like weirdly convenient, and also strange that they didn't just start there. Like, why did they need to all appear in the Crimean War? Why couldn't they have just been all woken up in different places to begin with? It was just a weird choice, and Doctor Who is not above, like, weirdly, conveniently placing characters where they need to be. That's happening in other series. But here, just the setup of it drew attention to how weird that setup is. Like, you could have just had them start there. And drawing attention to them, like, disappearing just made it feel more convenient for storytelling. But focusing on the different storylines here, I really liked the Doctor's sort of, like, figuring things out back in the Crimean War, like, fighting with this, like, commander British dude who just wants to go to war with people. All of that was I liked that dynamic. I liked her tricking this Sontaran dude into going back and, like, saying, like, oh, the Doctor's here. And it's like, oh, tell us where the Doctor is, and playing off the fact that she's a girl and they don't recognize that she's a girl now, or a new regeneration. I thought that was really clever. And just a lot of fun to just see that dynamic and her tricking them to figure out where the Sontarans are. However, this gets a little bit erased when the Doctor goes to confront the Sontaran dude, and she doesn't really have any plan other than she's going to yell at him, and I feel like she would know better than to know that that wasn't going to work, and so I'm surprised that she didn't have an actual other plan for that, and that she just is able to get away with living after that point. However, I did like the moment where the Doctor says, "I speak for all of humanity," and the guy says, "No, you don't speak for us." And the Sontaran's like, "You don't even speak for yourself," which I thought was a really cool, like, moment for the Doctor, of her, like, being disappointed in humanity there. So that was really cool, but the setup was just kind of frustrating to get there. Then she goes into one of the Sontaran ships, where she conveniently meets Dan. So let's jump over to Dan's storyline here. As I said, Dan conveniently gets brought back to Liverpool and meets up with his parents, who just, I don't think we've met them before in this episode, so it was just sort of like, and here's more characters to meet here that you're just gonna see at this time. And so it was like, they weren't, like, I liked their dynamic with Dan, but they were just characters that I had no connection to, and it's just people were there to, like, prop up Dan. And I like Dan, but it's just his stories feels just so detached from anything that I'm supposed to be caring about, or characters that I've had any investment in, that I was just like, okay, cool, sure. And also, like, I was unsure of, like, why Dan, like, I knew Dan was like, I want to help out, but him sneaking into a Sontaran ship was fun, but I'm like, why are you doing this? I know that you were, like, part with the Doctor for a little bit, and you do seem like a gung-ho guy, but it just feels weird that he's, like, had one kind of sort of adventure with the Doctor, not even really, and is already like, all right, I'm gonna take on the entire Sontaran army by myself kind of guy, which felt weird. And I mean, I don't want to say out of character, but just I haven't really established him as a character yet to really get that. However, that being said, it was fun, and the dynamics there were a good time. But then when he gets into the Sontaran ship, he also conveniently is able to speak with the Doctor in the past, which is, again, convenient. And I'm just sort of like, they just have this messaging system hooked up already and set up for him to message the Doctor, who's also happens to be in the exact right ship, to talk to him, or maybe all the ships are connected. It just was a little bit convenient, especially given the time difference going on here. That's just like a lot of these kind of overtly convenient things here. Again, fun in the moment. I enjoy in the moment. I love their banter back and forth, but you sit here and think about it, it's like, why is it happening this way? And I mean, it just seems to be happening because the plot demands it, and that happens a lot throughout this episode. I know I'm feeling negative on it. It was fun to watch, but it didn't really work out for me in terms of like thinking about it from the plot point of view. That being said, we have our two different plots here. Dan gets saved by the dog character. I loved him coming back. I definitely actually really enjoyed this like space dog. He's the best boy. He's the best boy in the whole universe. Yes, he is. Saving him, and they're sort of back and forth with him and Dan. A little bit of a dog ex machina, I guess, but I do enjoy his banter with Dan, and I do hope we get to see him more throughout this series because I've just really enjoyed him through every moment that I've seen him so far. The doctor, though, I also really loved her giving a lecture to the guy, the British guy saying, I need your help. I liked that moment. And her giving that lecture and like teaching them how to like kick the Sontarans off the planet because they have stuff that Mary had figured out I thought was really, really cool. And they managed to make that work. And then obviously the British guy blows up the Sontaran ships. All of that I think worked very, very well. But I was somewhat like, I didn't hate the British guy blowing up the ships and the doctor being frustrated at him. And I like the moment where Mary says, I'm glad that you do deal with us, doctor. And I thought that was a nice little connection. But it felt like a pale imitation of times where I've seen this sort of thing happen with the doctor before. And there's been many other times throughout Doctor Who history, even just in the modern era, where humans have done the disappointing thing and the doctor's upset. I'm thinking specifically of the moment I think of in the Christmas Invasion with David Tennant, where Harriet Jones, Prime Minister, she blew up the ship and David Tennant was really pissed off and says, doesn't she look tired? That moment really like hit that beat like harder for me and has been done before. And so it wasn't bad here. It was just like, I felt this scene happen before and you're not really adding much new to it, nor is it hitting the heights of the other moments that I've seen it in. So again, not bad, but I've seen it better in Doctor Who before. But then this brings us to our final storyline with Yaz and Vinder. Yaz and Vinder both get sent to this strange planet. Again, I'm not really sure why I should care too much. Like Dan, though I like Dan a little bit more than Vinder. I'm not entirely sure why I should care much about Vinder, other than like he's a dude in peril who should be saved, sure. But he's just like, I don't have much to connect with him. He's given brief bits of humanity last episode, like he said, go to hell, but I love seeing the stars and all that stuff. I do have some semblance of his character, but I'm not attached to him again to like feel worry for him throughout these sequences. So there's that. Yaz, on this planet where they're saying, can you repair? Can you repair? I liked the moment where she's, what would the doctor do? I liked seeing that, like, sort of like, oh, this is what the doctor would do. And she would go into repair and get involved in that. But that's ultimately all that amounts to in that moment. But I did like the moment. We also have Yaz encountering the Victorian Liverpool dude who appears to just be here just to remind us that he exists in the story. He's just sort of like, hi, I'm still here. I exist. I'm part of this narrative. I'm going to just walk out now and you'll get back to me when you get back to me. So he was just there, apparently, and had a creepy scene. But then we have our big villains who were the Swarm, Mishore, and the Passenger. The Passenger is like the third one of these people that just kind of shows up. Again, it's just like, all right, I guess he's there now. We have the third one for some reason. But I will say, number one, I loved the Swarm and Mishore's like outfits. Like they have fashion down to a T. I freaking love their look. It's wonderful. Here for it. I'm here for their fashion. But I also really loved the Swarm. Minerva, or whatever, Mishore, I think is her name. She was okay. She just was sort of like, I'm evil lady. But the Swarm guy, he doesn't have a much to give to him just yet, but the performance is like that little, like particular niche of villain that I really love, where it's like edging towards hammy, like edging towards over the top, but not too much so. And it's like not so over the top that it's ridiculous, but he has good moments where he's just like when the Mishore like says her name, he says like translations, but they'll do. Like there's just moments of like just the way he performs it is just kind of fun. And so I'm hoping he gets more time to shine, because I can already tell I like this actor and I like his performance and I want to see more of it. So I'm really hoping we get more than just the little bits and pieces that we get here. But then the doctor shows up on this planet as well. Again, somewhat conveniently, maybe less conveniently so because the TARDIS took her there, so I'm willing to buy that a little bit more. But then we learn from the Swarm when he confronts the Doctor that this is the planet Time with a bunch of, like, these people take care of time. They said the names of them. I don't remember. They're just people that take care of time, and they're the people that sort of hold time together in this universe, and he's going to destroy them, and he's going to destroy Vinder and Yaz by sort of infusing them with time. And so I'm liking... This setup seems interesting to me, that like time is falling in on itself, everything's sort of crashing together, as we saw already with the Sontarans, and so I think all of that is really, really cool, and I like the Sontaran storyline here, establishing that time is crashing together, and now we're getting to what hopefully will be the main story going forward, which is the Doctor facing off against the Swarm, and trying to fix whatever the hell is going wrong with time, with the Flux. So... this episode, I feel like at the end, now that we're sort of wrapping out my review of it, I deeply enjoyed it. I think there was a lot of fun to be had, but sitting back and thinking on some of the logistics of how this stuff worked, I thought there was a lot of plot conveniences to just get characters where they needed to go. However, I think, again, this was a little bit of an establishment episode 2, where it was sort of establishing concepts that we're going to be playing with further on into the series, this season, with the Swarm, with time folding in on itself, with things like being out of order and out of place. I think that this episode did a good job establishing those and still having a fun adventure in and of itself, unlike last episode, which was like throwing a whole bunch of concepts of it at us and not really giving us a fun adventure in and of itself. This one very much felt like, here's an adventure while we're establishing concepts. So what I'm hoping from now on is that now that we've got pretty much everything established, episode 3 going forward for the rest of the series will very much be like dealing with the actual plot now that we've gotten everything sort of set up and finished. And this episode was definitely an improvement on episode 1. So still some issues, still some problems, but I think a marked improvement on episode 2, and it set me up for being really excited for episode 3. So we're on a good track here. I wouldn't say this knocked it out of the park. I don't think it was great, but it's on a good trajectory that has me hopeful for moving forward. So that's pretty much my entire review of Doctor Who Episode 2, the Sontaran War, I believe was the name of the episode. Enjoyed it, but I'd love to hear all your thoughts down below. I'd love to hear your comments. Let me know what you thought of the episode. Don't forget to check out those videos that I talked about before when it came to the BBC as well, if you aren't informed on some of that stuff. But beyond all of that, thank you so much for watching, and I hope that you, as always, live long and stay sexy.